That's right. Exactly a year after the Taliban swept into the capital, Kabul, and took power, they have declared this 15th of August a national holiday, their Independence Day. And this morning I have seen Taliban fighters on motorbikes and on pickups brandishing the white flag of their self-declared Islamic Emirate here. But it has to be said, many people here in Kabul are far from in a celebratory mood. The streets are exceptionally quiet. They were this morning. Many people staying at home, wondering, waiting to see what will happen. But there's also a great sense of despondency for many people here in the capital. One resident of Kabul told me that he saw today as a dark day, rather like a day of mourning rather than of celebration. And that's reflected in how many Afghans refer to what took place exactly a year ago. They call it the collapse, sukut in Dari, rather than celebrating the birth of a new era for them. So many people not joining in the celebrations, but waiting to see what will happen. We are expecting some speeches from some Taliban officials. The authorities here, the de facto authorities, are keeping very tight-lipped about that for security reasons. They also fear that there could be perhaps further suicide bomb attacks, perhaps perpetrated by the local branch of the Islamic State group, their bitter enemies. So people keeping a tight eye on security here too.
And Catherine, you were, of course, on the ground last year to cover the fallout of this takeover, and you've been back to Afghanistan since then. Just what have you been noticing? What has and hasn't changed?
What's really striking here is the economic decline. Already one of the poorest countries in the world, Afghan's economy has further collapsed, and there are many people out of work, people who used to work for the former regime, the government, men. Of course, many women lost their jobs if they were employed in the government sector. At the moment, women who are able to go to work are involved in the health or education sectors, because as we know, many secondary schools, high schools for Afghan girls after the age of 12 are mostly closed down. So they have been kept at home for the past 331 days, and there is still no timeline from the de facto authorities of the Taliban about when that could open. And that is providing a lot of anger, causing a lot of anger here in Afghanistan and abroad as the Taliban try and push for international recognition. The rights of women and girls is a huge stumbling block. There are far fewer women out on the streets of Afghanistan, and the brain drain continues. You know, tens of thousands of people have already fled, and many more are seeking to leave. I'm being contacted by people still who are asking for a way out of the country. So the decline of the economy is very noticeable. There is perhaps in some of the remote areas a return to greater security. People who'd been in war-torn villages down in the south, for example, in Kandahar and Helmand provinces, where we've been reporting, say that they are glad the bombs and the bullets have stopped for now, and that Afghans can take roads and drive around the country in the way they couldn't before. But others are fearing that this is just perhaps a pause in the cycle of violence, and that could be more conflict to come.
And Catherine, just on that point, aid agencies are now saying that half of Afghanistan's 38 million people are now facing extreme poverty. And you've been finding out about some rather drastic measures that certain families have been forced to take.
That's right. More than 20 million people in Afghanistan today do not have enough to eat, and they're dependent on international aid. And the aid sector has been dried up a lot because after the Taliban swept to power, international sanctions kicked in, meaning that the huge aid flows that made up some 70% of Afghanistan's budget before dried up instantly. So you have many people, especially the poorest in society, struggling to survive, struggling to feed themselves and their families. And we have met people here in Kabul. In order to feed their families, well, they're taking desperate measures such as selling off daughters at a very young age into marriage just to be able to keep going.